Good morning, students. Today we will move on with chapter 7, which is pricing decisions of strategic cost management and performance evaluation subject, which is paper 5 of the CA finance syllabus. This chapter is a very critical chapter to be understood. At the end of this chapter, hopefully each of you will be able to better understand what is pricing strategy all about, and hopefully also explain the situations under which different pricing strategies would be executed and how the cost or the price would be quoted to a customer depending upon varying situations. Please bear in mind that any sort of pricing decision of an organization would certainly have a direct impact on profitability from a profit maximization perspective, and therefore it is critical for organizations to have an appropriate pricing policy in the organization, which should be mapped in turn to the overall objectives or the strategy of the organization. So from the strategy of the organization, the vision, mission, the pricing policy should flow, from which the pricing kind of structure would emanate, the different types of pricing structures. Now, as I said, pricing decision will certainly impact profit maximization. When we look at profit maximization, certainly we should not ignore qualitative factors as well. We have understood even in the basics of financial management subject in intermediate that profit maximization alone is not what is important to us. Wealth maximization is primarily what concerns us, and therefore qualitative as well as quantitative factors will have to be borne in mind. Additionally, decisions will also have to be taken in mind, keeping in mind the long-term perspective or the impact the decision which we take today would have on our long-term image. Okay. So typically, a pricing decision would be one which is extremely crucial and a difficult decision that a firm will have to make, because there are a lot of uncertainties prevailing in the market. It's an extremely dynamic market, competitive market, in which you will have to be able to gauge the customers, prospective customers' viewpoint about your product and then try to quote a price, which is not a joke. Such a decision typically also affects the long-term survival of any profit-oriented enterprise. As I said, the long-term perspective must not be borne in mind. Now, to start off, if we were to understand what is all about a theory of price, which is a microeconomic concept relating to individual firms, all that it implies is it is that optimum price. Price basically is defined as that price, that optimum price at which the firm is able to earn the maximum profits. So if someone were to ask me how would I define an optimum price to be, I would say optimum price would be a price at which the firm enjoys or earns the maximum profits. And when we refer to maximum profits, just for information's sake, it can be analyzed into two components. One, maximum profit at a unit level, which means the selling unit price is higher than the unit cost price by the maximum differential. So at a unit level, there could be a particular unit level at which we will be enjoying the maximum differential, or the maximum profit would be earned. Is that what we are referring to as the optimum price? So in other words, does optimum price means the highest selling price for each unit that we will be able to secure from customers? Now, just before moving on, just imagine if a particular pencil which I have manufactured at a cost of 1 rupee has a prospective buyer in the market who is willing to pay 20 rupees for the pencil. Now, I would have made a 19 rupee profit with regard to that one particular unit of pencil. Now, if I'm going to have thousands of other similar pieces of pencils with me, would it be possible for me to sell each of the pencil at the same 20 rupees? Therefore, from a maximization of profit perspective, I am stuck in a situation where I am unable probably to sell beyond the very first pencil. Now, why would this arise? This would arise essentially because The customer who bought it from me initially might have been under an emergency situation where he or she desperately needed a pencil and therefore didn't mind paying 20 rupees at that particular moment. But the moment that particular requirement has been satisfied, the same customer would only be willing to pay 1 rupee and 50 paisa only for the next pencil, which is what would be the true value of the pencil. Therefore, the second component of price is not the unit price, but is the total value that we will be determining, meaning the total profits. And when we refer to the total profits, it basically is nothing but a product of two variables. One, the quantity or the number of units being sold, and the profit element inbuilt in each unit, which is nothing but the unit selling price minus the unit cost price. Therefore, with regard to my example relating to pencils, if I had priced my pencils just at 1 rupee 50 paisa, maybe in a matter of half an hour I could have sold all the 1,000 pencils. The profit that I would have made on 1,000 pencils at the rate of 50 paisa would have been 500 rupees, whereas in the first case I enjoyed only a 19 rupee profit with the balance lying in stock with me. This is what you need to understand, that optimum price is a price at which we are concerned with the total profits of the firm being maximized, not the unit profit. Okay. Now, there are some charts given in the study material which are quite self-explanatory even from our microeconomics perspective. I'll leave it to you to read it. The next concept we move on with is profit maximization model. Now, as we understood, profit maximization means that point of production at which the profit of the entity or the firm stands maximized. Right, in our 12th in microeconomics students, we have been taught that an entrepreneur or an entity or a firm continues to produce till the time the MR curve cuts the MC curve, which is the marginal revenue curve and the marginal cost curve intersect. And that too, the MC curve basically should be cut by, or rather MC curve should be cutting the MR curve from below. This is what we would have learned in the earlier days. Well, the gist of it is MR and MC must be equated. Now, it's a very simple logic. The moment your MC tends to be higher than the MR, meaning for each incremental or additional unit that you produce, it costs you 5 rupees per unit, but the unit selling price that you will be able to fetch for that additional unit is going to be less than 5. So your total revenue will actually drop. The total profitability will drop by 10 paisa by producing that extra 1 unit, as the incremental cost is higher than the incremental revenue, clearly signaling out that this is the point at which you should have stopped your production and not proceed further. It is something very similar to your any objective type of examination where we have a negative marking. Please do not entertain answering questions which will fetch you a negative mark and therefore reduce the scope of getting the total increased. Moving on, there is an equation that we can actually use to arrive at what is that ideal price at which the firm will be able to maximize its profits. I repeat, when I say maximize the profits, it will be quantity being sold, the total quantity being sold times the unit price. Now the equation is given in the form of P, which is price equals A, which is price at which demand is 0, minus B, Q. B represents slope of the demand curve, which is equal to change in price divided by change in quantity multiplied by Q, which is quantity demanded. Now, what is all about this A? If one were to give you a product and ask you what is the price to be quoted for this product, well, it's a difficult question to answer. Now, what would you have to do? You might have to go to the market to do some kind of a survey to know. Now, let us assume that, for example, I gave you a pencil. You go to the market and start quoting for the pencil a price in the market of 1 rupee and 10 paisa. Customer is willing to buy. 1 rupee 25 paisa to another customer. That person is also willing to buy. 1 rupee 50 paisa Still customers are willing to buy. The moment you touch 1 rupee 75 paisa, well, there are no takers in the market. People tend to think you are overpricing your product. So well, at 175, till 174, 1 rupee 74 paisa, people were willing to buy. But then at 1.75, there are no takers, indicating that this is the price at which demand has been made as equal to zero. Well, anything above 1.75 also is equal to zero only, quantity demanded. But we are interested in that point at which the demand gets shifted to zero for the first time. So we just plot that point, which is 1.75 rupee per unit of pencil, and then we work backwards by checking, well, if I were to reduce the price by some amount, what would be the incremental increase in the units being sold? Suppose I were to drop the price from 1.75 to 1.74. What would be the number of takers in the market? Suppose it is going to be 5 of them who are willing to buy. So we would say the change in price effectively is just 1 paisa, whereas the change in quantity is 5 units. So change in price divided by change in quantity gives you the slope, multiplied by quantity demanded at 1.74 paisa per pencil is 5. That result will be subtracted from 1.75 rupees per pencil. The result that you obtain will be the price at which you will be able to obtain the maximum profit in terms of your production being sold. Similarly, there is another formula which is given to calculate marginal revenue as equal to P equals, the marginal revenue is equated to A minus 2 times B into Q, and the individual variables have already been explained by me earlier. So there's an example given in the study material. You can try solving it. Hopefully you will get the result correctly. Now, from here, we launch ourselves into the topic which relates to pricing under different market structures. See, the concept itself about this chapter is pricing decisions. And obviously, in real life situation, we find that the situation is dynamic, it's completely different. There are different possibilities existing. Therefore, conceptually, they have very nicely introduced the topic of what are the different types of market structures that we could possibly see in the market, which we have already learned in our economics in 12th, also in our CA foundation level or CPT level of syllabus. Now there are different types. One would be a perfect competition, monopoly. Another market structure would be monopolistic competition and also oligopoly. Now there are some paragraphs explaining the features of these market structures. Let me just quickly give you a kind of a synopsis. A perfect competition is an idealistic situation, okay, where what happens is the number of sellers in the market will be virtually infinite, large. The number of buyers will be infinite, which will be large. No individual seller will be able to enjoy an influence over the market. In other words, occupies a very small proportion of the market. Same principle applies even to the buyers. Therefore, the price of the product is determined by the market purely. Products are homogeneous or identical. You can't spot any difference between tomato 1 and tomato 2 or potato 3 and potato 4. You can't find any difference. They are perfect substitutes. So there is nothing which enables a seller to differentiate himself from the other sellers and charge a premium for that. Therefore, the sellers are price takers in a perfect competition. Now, when they are price takers, obviously, there is no concept of this pricing policy. They can't go and quote a price. For example, if the price of tomatoes in the market is 5 rupees per kilo, and if it is a perfect competition structure, then if I am a seller or a vendor of tomatoes who tries to charge 5 rupees and 50 paisa per kilo of tomato, no customer would be interested in buying it from me because they know this same product is available outside at 5 rupees. Why would I come here? I would have lost my entire business. Similarly, if I were to try and quote a price of 4 rupees 50 paisa, which is lesser than the market price, to weed away all the customers from the other vendors, what is likely to happen? Look at it this way. Why would I actually want to forego 50 paisa profit from my kitty when I know infinite quantity of goods can be supplied at a price of 5 rupees itself? Why would I want to forego the 50 paisa? I would naturally not come down to lesser than the market price. So effectively, sellers are price takers. In other words, they can't have any influence on the price, and therefore, from a profit maximization perspective, we know that profit is equal to revenue minus cost. In perfect competition, well, you can't tweak the selling price or the sales. You can't do anything about it. So all that the firms are capable of doing is try to exercise a good element or good amount of cost control by introducing cost control measures. Try to keep your costs at the bare minimum so that your profitability is enhanced. Then we move on to monopoly as a structure. Under monopoly, typically what should happen is, well, there is only one seller in the market effectively who virtually controls the market and represents the industry supply itself. There are many buyers on the other side. The product that the monopolist typically will be supplying very logically cannot be something which is homogeneous. It has to be highly differentiated. In other words, a close substitute must not be available. Something unique must be existing about the product. Otherwise, why would there exist a monopoly? Why would we want to go only to one particular vendor unless something unique is available over there? Now, since no close substitutes basically are available, the monopolist enjoys some kind through differentiation also existing. The monopolist is able to enjoy some kind of a market power or an influence over the market, by which I mean he can possibly charge a price which will be slightly above than a perfectly competitive price, and still buyers will flock to him. But then please bear in mind, does this mean that the monopolist can charge an infinitely higher price? Certainly not, because customers will definitely have something called the element of reasonableness, and therefore he will have to take into account the price elasticity into his calculations and arrive at a price to be quoted to the customers. So a monopolist will have a little more of freedom with regard to tweaking the selling price vis-a-vis what exists in the case of perfect competition, wherein the vendors have no such freedom in their hands or no such privilege with them. Then we move on to a market structure called as monopolistic competition. Now the term is fairly clear. It implies there is a competition, something like a perfect competition. There is a competition, meaning there are good large number of suppliers in the market as well as large number of buyers in the market. Now, I repeat, there are large number of sellers, there are large number of buyers. Now, but then there is this monopolistic word which is a prefix to the competition. What does this signal? Now, in a perfect competition, we saw there were large sellers, large buyers, but one critical factor that we understood in perfect competition was no individual seller, buyer as well. Let me emphasize on the sellers first. No individual seller enjoys a huge market share, or let me put it this way, enjoys a market share such that he or she is able to influence the market in any way. In other words, each vendor occupies only a small or enjoys only a small share of the market, which is virtually non-influential. And this is what generally differentiates a perfect competition from a monopolistic competition. Now, what is it that differentiates? Please understand it very carefully. Now, with regard to monopolistic competition, there are a large number of buyers and a large number of sellers. The sellers are so many that they would also not be able to control the market in any very big way. But their market share would not be very huge and all. Then, what is the technical difference between this type of market structure and the perfect competition market structure? The difference lies in the element of the control that a market monopolistic competition offers because of some kind of product differentiation or service differentiation that is provided by the suppliers. Now, what do I mean? Take, for example, a city where you might have n number of grocery shops or suppliers. Okay. Now, on the street in which you reside, let's assume there are two grocery shops, for example. Now, each of those grocery shops might not be having a huge market share, but then one grocery shop opens only at 10 a.m. and shuts the shop by 6 p.m. The other one basically opens at 7 a.m. and closes the shop only by night 10 p.m. Can you see a difference in terms of the second grocery shop, in terms of being able to provide services over a longer period of time? Therefore, from a service perspective, that particular grocery shop enjoys some kind of a monopoly and therefore might be able to charge a premium towards that extent. Now, with regard to the other firm, which is probably your the grocery shop one, which is supplying items from only 10 till 6. Now, let's assume that in that kind of a grocery shop, the products that are being delivered, okay, are being packed in a very attractive manner. Okay. Now that is something which differentiates that particular grocery shop from the other one, and therefore that person is able to charge a slightly different amount compared to others. This is what is a key differentiating factor between monopolistic competition and perfect competition. Therefore, even in monopolistic competition, the vendors or the firms would operate only at that level where MR equals MC, not in a situation where MC is in excess of MR. Okay, so then we move on to the next market structure type, which is oligopoly, wherein there are a large number of buyers, but then there are only few firms in the market which will be catering to the industry requirements. The few firms will virtually be regulating that industry. The major share of the industry supply would be met with by the few firms, and therefore they are able to virtually control the market. But then the number of firms being few, what happens is, if one firm tries to reduce its selling price, and before I move on with this analysis, the type of products that would be sold by these firms in the market would generally be homogeneous, which means they would be kind of close substitutes, not perfect substitutes, okay, close substitutes. But then the firms will have to try and differentiate themselves from their competitors. Okay, therefore, they will be trying to differentiate themselves by investing a big amount of money in advertisements, promotions, marketing related campaigns, etc., to try and build a good brand for themselves and reaping customers by purchasing effectively their loyalty, which is customer loyalty, is ensured through brand related relationships. So in an oligopoly, firms are typically competing not by way of price wars, but by investing a huge amount of money on other activities, non-price related aspects like your promotions, ads, etc., to try and create a brand awareness. Thereby, they try to differentiate their product in the market. Okay. Now, remember that maybe as you hear this, one might tend to think, then what is the difference between oligopoly and monopolistic competition? Even in monopolistic competition, the firms are trying to differentiate themselves by they also will not compete by way of price wars. They try to differentiate by investing huge amount of money in their brand related campaigns. The point is, vendors in the case of, or the firms in the case of monopolistic competition are huge and therefore are not able to influence the market in a very big way. Whereas in the case of oligopoly, the number of firms being few in the market, one firm, if that firm reduces the price, would be able to sway the customers of the other competitors towards it, and therefore this will automatically be responded to by the other firms or its competitors by way of price reduction. the other firms will be left with no option but to retaliate. Otherwise, they will lose their customers. This will set on the process of price wars, which will be an ongoing exercise and which will not propel something which will be good from an industry harmony perspective. Therefore, firms avoid competing by way of price wars but emphasize a lot on product differentiation in terms of brand creation, brand awareness being created in the market, spending a huge amount of money on ads, etc. And few firms are virtually able to control the market. That's an oligopoly structure. Now, there are certain pricing strategies which oligopolies can also adopt, something like predatory pricing. Now, predatory pricing implies quoting a price in a market which will be so low, probably it can even be below the full cost of production, to try and actually avoid new competitors from entering the market and to probably reach out to the existing customers of the competitors. Two, it can also adopt limit pricing strategy, again to prevent new entrants from entering the market, or the number of firms in the industry being few in the case of oligopoly, all these firms could form something like a cartel or a group. Okay, let's assume, for example, in the telephone industry, okay, you have the Reliance, the Bharat, the Airtel, the Vodafone, etc. Such firms probably come together, and I wouldn't use the word collude, but then they have an understanding, okay, wherein each one has decided, I would target this market while you target the other market, for example, and this is how we will enjoy making profits. So that possibly could be done, but something which is actually not good in the overall interest of the economy. And through that process, if prices are being increased, then the profit margins obviously would increase, and if the profit margins increase, obviously people who are existing outside of this industry, I mean entrepreneurs, would probably want to explore this industry and get in. Then there could also be a cost plus pricing, which is nothing but a margin above your full cost of production, which includes your variable and fixed cost. Alternatively, a profit margin can be added to the variable cost component to give you enough profit, to give you enough money to take care of your fixed cost expenses as well. Then we move on to the other segment of this oligopoly pricing strategy, which is non-price strategies. And if one were to look at it, we find, based on what we discussed, to avoid destructive price wars, firms would adopt something like trying to improve the quality or after sales service, extending guarantees, spending on advertisements, sponsorships, product placements, sales promotion, loyalty schemes, and so on and so forth. This is what generally is resorted to more in the case of oligopoly and also monopolistic competition.